The only time black men are allowed to speak is when it benefits others. So hey, this is your opportunity to speak. I want to hear from you. And if you want to make this voice louder and clearer, then what you need to do is contribute to the Cash App, the PayPal, and the Super Chat. I appreciate you. Hey, what's up, you guys? This is Dennis Sperling. I'm back. I want to first give a shout out to everybody who's contributed to the Super Chat. Thank you so much, guys. You guys, Volcanus, my man, is back. Thank you so much for the $5 Super Chat. Randall, thank you so much. He says there are multiple ways to the goal of education, of skilled labor, skilled trade. I'm myself a truck driver, top 15% earner. You got to believe in yourself, work for it. Good job, man. I'm proud of you. Thank you so much. Of course, my man Volcanus says, Uncle D is a legend. Salute to the chat. I hope you guys enjoyed that new video that I just put out there. I want you guys to make sure you remember to contribute to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and PayPal. I have nothing yet on the Cash App, nothing yet on the PayPal. Remember, if you want to do a private consultation with me, you can hit me up at sperlingdennis@gmail.com. In addition to that, you can purchase my books at Amazon.com. They're a great read. They explain to you some concepts that you may not understand, help you resolve some of the conflict that you have, you know, growing up in this very confusing world that we live in, especially coming from the perspective of a black man. It takes me many years to get to where I am. You guys can catch up with me in a matter of maybe a week, however long it takes you to read this book. But in the meantime, today, we're going to talk about black men. We're going to talk about black American men and how we have learned to succeed in a system that is designed for us to fail. Now, some of you are like, oh, come on, Dennis, you're making this up. Here you go again. What do you mean designed for us to fail? There it failed. There was never any intention for there to be a black population of black men here in the United States. It was never that intention. It was always intended for them to work us to death and push us out of here. I have, put this post up. It's received 71 comments, 145 shares. I know that what I'm telling is the truth, because when I get shares like that, good or bad, it lets me know what people are thinking. Kimberly says in response, that's why they are my heroes with their sexy selves. Okay, whatever, Kim, appreciate you. Enoch Alexander says, what? Adapt and survive is the name of the game. And we have, as black men, mastered that. My man Harry Daniel says, facts, Uncle D. Let me see what else we got. Because the system uses black women to destroy them. Yeah, some would say that's true. You should check out, okay, Dr. Umar video. We talked about that last week. So, we got a lot of different guys in here. My man says it was, not so much anymore. Point out what exactly is codified in law that makes anyone fail or be excluded. We may want to start with or don't or affirmative action, or perhaps what hope to codify. So he's saying, no, not anymore. I get it. There's always going to be guys like that. Yes. And we thank the Red Pill community for putting us up on game. Thank you for salute. All the men in the manosphere to keep our men out of the matriarch's effery of American system in the world, saving our soul. Well, here's the thing, fellas, black American men, whether you refer to yourself as FBA, which means Foundational Black American, or ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, we are different than other members of the African diaspora. We as black men have been specifically targeted by this racist dominant society. It's no wonder that the two highest officials of the U.S. government today of African descent have been either of Kenyan or Jamaican descent. Neither have been foundational black American or American descendant of slave. Nevertheless, our culture thus far has allowed us to solve every single puzzle and trap that we had that have for us. We are taking our rightful place and moving out those who would interfere with us. The system is designed to exploit our failure as well as our success. An example of that is you could be a criminal, be a D-boy, or you could be a black man who's a sports star making millions of dollars. Whether you're a D-boy, if they're going to arrest you, take your money, seize your property, put you in prison, the system benefits off that. You're an amazingly talented athlete. The system is going to use your talent, make millions of dollars off of it, give you billions of dollars off of it, give you some crumbs, and then after that, move you out there and move in the next one. So they've made, whether we're successful or failure in that regard, they've made a way to capitalize on both of those. Some of us ask the question, why won't black men design this system instead of only looking to survive in this one, which is openly hostile to us? In other words, why don't you build your own? God, some say that should be the focus. That should be our focus. And you're right, but it would result in the same thing that happened in Black Wall Street. It's the Black Wall Street effect. We know what happened in Tulsa. We know what happened at the turn of the 20th century, 1950, all those thousands of towns that have been built by ex-slaves right up out of slavery after 1865 got destroyed. We know that. Why? Because they want to destroy our progress. It's simple old jealousy. You know, we have billionaires like JayZ, people who are close to billionaires like Sean Combs, Tyler Perry, billionaire, Percy Miller, Robert Smith, plus many others who could start a movement, but they don't for a reason. The middle class man can't do it without funding, and they won't do it because, you know, obviously there's no impetus behind it for them to do it. So they also know that it'll more than likely, a lot of those whose histories understand what they're dealing with, it'll get destroyed. So, you know, that's why we look at places like Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I remember, it's a jealousy thing. If you go back to the country of, what was the Songhai Empire, the Mali Empire, they destroyed. So what we have now is a situation where we have a culture that understands that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run some facts down for you guys. I want you to check some stuff out, all right? First thing you got to understand is that black men in recent years, in recent years, this is from an article, I'm gonna read it straight out of the Philadelphia Tribune. Black men are succeeding in America despite all these obstacles that we have in our way. In recent years, much of the racial news in America has been sobering, if not depressing. Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Walter Scott, Ferguson, Baltimore, and Charlottesville. While many public commenters like Ta-Nehisi Coates have underlined the enduring character of racism in America and the ways in which America's racial divide has exacted a particular kind of toll on black men and black boys, there is today an unheralded good news about black American men, okay? Despite a portrait of race relations that often highlights the negative, especially regarding black men, many Americans, according to the 2006 study of the Washington Post, Kaiser Family Foundation, and Harvard University, believe that crime, unemployment, and poverty are endemic among African American men. The truth is, most black men will not be incarcerated or unemployed and are not poor, even if black men are more likely than other men to experience these outcomes. So what they're basically doing is, this is going back as far as 2018, and saying that the stats are now 64% of black men are in the middle class, okay? And it's also saying that 20% of black men are rich. This is what they're saying. So the truth is that most black men will not be incarcerated and are not unemployed and are not poor. This is the vast majority, right? This is the majority of it. Even if black men are more likely than other men to experience those outcomes. But the fact is, we're not, okay? This is what we're not. The truth is, most black men are not incarcerated, okay? They're not unemployed and they're not poor. So what does that mean? Most black men have jobs and are in the middle class. That's what they're saying. In fact, millions of black men are flourishing in America today. See, this is not something that people are willing to tell you. This is when you hear these folks on the internet, these lovely ladies talking about how bad off black men are. And those are just old tropes. Those are lies, family. And if anybody wants to, references to this are at the bottom of the details here where it says references. You can pull up everything I'm about to pull up for those who want to know where this is. Our new report, Black Men Making It in America, spotlights two pieces of particular good news about economic well-being of Black men. First, the share of Black men in poverty has fallen from 41% in 1960 to 18%. So there are only 18%, there are less than 20% of Black men who are poor or in poverty. Everybody else is middle class or rich. So that's 82% of Black men are either middle class or rich. That's basically what they're saying. Second, or upwardly mobile, I should say. Second, the more importantly, the share of Black men in the middle class as measured by their family income has risen from 38% to 57%. This is a 3-year-old article. It's now up to 64%. In other words, about 1 to 2 Black men in America have reached the middle class or higher, fellas, right? About 1 in 2. That's over half of us. But now it's, like I said, 64, so it's closer to 2 out of 3. All right, so this is good news. It's important and should be widely disseminated because it may help reduce prejudicial view of Black men in society at large and negative portrayals of Black men in the media. Nobody's talking about this. Nobody wants to tell you that you brothers are actually doing very well. This is the good news. Irrespective of all that we have to deal with, look at what we've done. Look at what we've overcome. We've overcome broken homes, crime-infested homes, drugs, crack, all that stuff, the criminal justice system. To do what? To be successful. And we're moving forward. Nobody talks about this. That's why I'm putting it in your face like that. Shout out to Malika M. Bain. Thank you so much. We men must learn how to work smarter as well as harder obstacles, trials, tribulations, build character. Help us become masters of destiny. Thank you so much. It should also engender hope among African Americans, particularly young Black men. You young Black men, this is what they're saying. This article, again, is from 2018. Okay, this is from July 2018. This is less than 3 years ago. This is what they're saying about Black men. So have hope. So let's keep it moving. Correcting overly negative depictions and attitudes regarding Black men is important because they shape how Black men are treated, right? Again, I tell you guys all the time, it's the negative stereotypes often coming from our own community, which is the reason that we are perceived the way we're perceived. But all of that stuff is just not true. Correcting overly negative depictions and attitudes regarding Black men is important because they shape how Black men are treated and how Black men view their potential. You don't believe you can do it. You think everybody else is poor and broke when they're telling you that the vast majority of Black men are in the middle class. You only got 18% poor. And I promise you, many of those are like elderly guys. That a lot of that, just old, sick people, you know, kids. So it's you know, if you out, you know, you're out working, man, you got a good shot of making it. Alan Jenkins, executive director of Opportunity of Agenda Social Justice Organization, noted that research and experience show that expectations and biases on the part of potential employers, teachers, healthcare providers, police officers, and other stakeholders influence life outcomes of millions of Black men. So they treat you how they perceive you are. Nobody's treating us like 82% of us are in the middle class or rich. Nobody's treating us like that. They're treating us like we're poor. So it's on us, family, on us brothers, to begin to change that stereotype. So what routes are Black men taking to make it in America? Let's see. What are they doing? How are we doing it to make it? Tracking Black men from youth, adulthood through their 50s using data from the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth in 1979. We identified 3 factors that are associated with their success, education, work, and marriage. This is it. Education, work, and marriage. This is going to be the determining factors. Black men who work full-time, had some college education, or were married were much more likely to be members of the middle upper class by the time they got in their 50s. We found, for instance, that the odds that Black men make it to the middle or upper class are at least 3 times higher for those men who marry compared to their peers who never married. But I mean, the reason that is because typically men who have money are more appealing to women who want to get married. So that guy was probably already upwardly mobile. She saw him, latched on to him, and got hold of him. That's why that happened. Their financial well-being is higher, partly because married Black women contribute a higher share of income to the household than other married women. In other words, they said black women make more money than they contribute. In other words, they get out there and work, adding to the chances of black men achieving middle class and higher status in the U.S. We found that serving in the military was associated with a 72% increase in odds that black men made it into the middle class or higher as 50 something. So in other words, the military, you straight out of high school, you join the military, you stay in there 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you get the benefits, you get the money. A lot of your issues are resolved. You're in the middle class. It's easy. By providing stable work, good health care, housing, and opportunities for advancement, by championing virtues such as duty, responsibility, loyalty, perseverance, and by pushing racial integration, the U.S. military served as an important route into the middle class. Remember, police, military, this was a way for poor white men to become part of the middle class. And now that same thing is happening for blacks. Those civil servants and military servants often acted as a buoying system to lift one up out of one social class to another. And now black men are capitalizing on that. Moreover, the U.S. military is also known for its marriage-oriented culture. And we found that black men who served in the military as young men were much more likely to be married later at ages 29 to 37. So, of course, you compare to their peers who did not serve. Now, of course, you're in the military. What do they do in the military? Either you get married, you get marriage quarters, right? You're not married, they put you in a bunk with a bunch of other guys over there, like you guys know that. This marriage advantage played a role in boosting their later odds of success. You get stability when it comes to marriage. Of course, the story our report tells is not all rose-colored. Black men are significantly less likely to make it into the middle class, the upper class, than the white Asian peers. The odds of black men in their 50s making it to the middle class were about 60% lower for those who were charged with the crime as a young adult. So this is the thing. If they can hit you with that crime, it's a lot harder. If you stay out of trouble, you get a little education, you get a stable relationship, even if it's not quite a marriage, it helps you out tremendously. All right. So these are some of the factors you can play into, but them early crimes, that's why they always target young black men. Those early crimes, they get you. You had that gun, that weed, you're trying to be a D-boy in the 1990s and the early 2000s, caught that charge. That's something that'll hold you back because it steps you back. Given the racial segregation, poverty, and the bias effect, the odds that young black males get caught up in the criminal justice system, racism limits the economic fortunes of them. See, it's a trap. They get you in that system early on, and that handicaps you. You can't get jobs everywhere. You can't get student loans oftentimes. It takes you a while to rehabilitate yourself. And so that's why it's important to stay out of the criminal justice system. What's more, right now, only a small minority of black men graduate from college. 17%. 17%. Schools and colleges need to do more to identify, recruit, and support young black men so they're accepted and attend to graduate four-year colleges and universities. So now about 17% of black men have college degrees, graduate. Notice I said graduate from college, not enroll. See, the trick thing about this is they'll tell you that our lovely ladies are the most educated group, but what they're really saying is they're the most enrolled group in college. That doesn't mean they graduate. Here, they're telling you black men who graduate from college are 17%. They're not telling you how many black men enroll. It's probably about 28, 29%. And then you got a 17% of them who graduate. And so now, amidst all the wrong about race in America, we cannot lose sight of two sets of social facts today. 1 in 2 black men have made it in America, right? And these men have traveled routes into the middle class that can't be replicated. Isn't that an interesting comment? The evidence suggests that if more Americans knew how many black men were succeeding and more about the routes they're taking, it would reduce racial prejudice and engendering hope amongst today's young black males that have a shot of making it in America. I think actually would work in the reverse. It would say, well, they don't need our help anymore. blah, 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 blah. Now, an interesting thing I want to talk about with you guys is the culture that we have. How is it that we have a culture that is designed for us to fail, but we as Black men are succeeding? Here's the thing I want you to understand. Not all Black men are succeeding. What do I mean by that? Well, I want you guys to take a look at something, okay? African American suicide fact sheet from 2014, data from 2016. I want you to take a careful look at this, family. This is very important, all right? Now, we can kind of go over why people commit suicide. We can kind of go over why folks have issues, but depression, I believe, poverty, those sort of things, not being prepared for this racist society is something that drives a lot of men to depression. Racism literally cuts time off your life. It causes you, you know, delayed suicide, alcohol, binge drinking, all that sort of stuff. So I want to actually run some of these stats. I want to talk about it. Let's look at this. In 2014, 2,421 African Americans died by suicide in the U.S. Of these, 1946 were male, which is 80%. You know, and overall suicide rate is 100,000 was 5.46. In 2014, there were 475 African American female suicides in the United States. The suicide rate of African American females was the lowest among men and women of all ethnicities. Okay, so Black women are far less likely to kill themselves, even in this racist society. Because, and it's my theory, and this is what we're going to talk about, is the culture has prepared for them to succeed in this racist society. Same as men. All right. Now, in 2015, researchers released data showing that there were more suicides among African American children, 5 to 11, than among Caucasian children. This was the first national study to show observed suicide rates for African Americans than for Caucasians in any group. And why is that? Because there was a time when suicide, and this is just 20 years ago, when suicide was a white thing. Matter of fact, if you go to some old statements and whatnot, you go to some stuff that Black folks had to say about the suicide rate back in the day, they'll tell you that. I'm going to slide down to here and read this to you. Suicide has become the leading cause of death in the U.S. among all age groups, but particularly in youth and young adults. It is the second leading cause of death among people from 10 to 34 years old. Parents, teachers, and professionals must be able to both talk about it and understand the risk for vulnerable children of any race. But those of us who work with Black youth may also need to address some myths about suicide in the African American community. For example, one such myth has its start almost 3 decades ago. Kevin Early and Ronald Akers' interviews with African American pastors concluded that the suicide is a white thing and that Black people are accustomed to struggling through life without succumbing to suicide. Let's listen to that again. Suicide is a white thing and that Black people are accustomed to struggling through life's challenges without succumbing to suicide. All right, those authors concluded that Black people see suicide as a white thing, but it is a myth that Black people do not die by suicide. Here's the thing you got to understand. This article was written on January 17, 2020. So when they refer to 3 decades ago, they're talking about the 90s. They're talking about the 80s. In the 1980s, this was true. Okay, what I'm showing you right now is an article. All right, what has happened since the 1980s? Key facts about Black immigrants in the U.S. Okay, Black immigrant population in the U.S. rose to 4.2 million in 2016. All right, in 1980, there were 816,000 Black people from different countries in the United States. Over in the 1990s, it was 1.4 million. By 2000, only 10 years later, it was 2.4 million. Now in 2016, it's 4 million. Okay, now what's going on here? Let's read some. Where are they coming from? The Black immigrant population comes from Jamaica. It comes from Haiti, largely, There's basically 1.3 million black folks from other countries that come from Jamaica. This is the West Indies. And you got some guys from Trinidad, the Dominican Republic, Ghana, of course, and some other African countries. But the bottom line is, it's been since 1980. Now, the reason I bring up, and I want you guys to specifically pay close attention to these numbers, the vast majority of Africans that come here, black people that come here who are not ADOS, they come from the Caribbean, right? Now, again, we are talking about the diversity of the population and when it started. The black population we're talking about suicide also, because my point is to prove to you that our culture as black American men has done what? It has made us better prepared to thrive in a system that is designed for us to fail. And that's what makes us different, because we're specifically targeted and we've learned how to negotiate the system. If you appreciate what I'm doing, get the likes up, hit the like button. We haven't hit the like button in a while. I want you guys to hit the like button. If you like this, hit the #1 button, hit the thumbs up button, hit the like button, hit the number. We can talk about Sweetie out there singing on Venice Beach if you guys want to, but I think this is more important. Hit the #1 button if you appreciate this conversation. Hit the like button if you appreciate this conversation. Also contribute to the super chat. I'm going to show you why you're different. All right. And then later on, we'll have a video presentation. But if you appreciate this, hit the #1 button, hit the like button, and also contribute to the super chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal. Now, back to what I was saying, the black population, and this is from an article by Pew Research Center dated March 25th, 2001, or 2021. The black population of the United States is diverse. Its members have varied histories in the nation. Many are descendants of enslaved people, while others are recently arrived immigrants. What's going to be the difference between someone who's a recently arrived immigrant and someone who's part of the population of black people who've been here? Well, you're going to have a culture that's steeped in an understanding of how to deal with this racist society that's hell-bent on destroying us. You are going to have been surrounded by people coming up who've taught you how to survive in this racist society that's designed, how to be successful in this society that's designed to keep you back. Recent immigrants aren't necessarily going to have that. The black population also has nuanced ethnic and racial identities reflecting intermarriage and international immigration. As a result, there are key distinctions in demographic and economic characteristics between different parts of the national black population, highlighting the diverse multitude of backgrounds. So this is acknowledging the fact that we got a lot of people from other places, even though they're black. The U.S. black population is also growing. In 2019, 46.8 million people in the U.S. identified their race as black, either alone or as part of a multiracial or ethnic background. That is up from 3.6 million. So basically, we've gained 10 million people since 10 million people since 2000. The black share of the U.S. population is higher today than it was in 2000 as well, but 14% of the national population said they were black in 2019, up from 13% in 2020, okay? Now, at some time, the black population racial self-identification is changing. Among those who self-identify as black or African American, the share who say it is their only racial or ethnic identification has declined over the past 2 decades. In 2019, 40.7 million or 87% identified their race as black alone and their ethnicity as non-Hispanic, while around 3.7 million or 8 identify their race as black and other. Okay, so that's about 10% of us are saying we're mixed, you know, most often white and not Hispanic. Another 2.4 million, 5% self-identified as both black and Hispanic. So what is that saying? That's saying, you know, you got people who are saying I'm mixed with white, 8%, and then you got 5% who's saying, you know, I'm black, but I'm Hispanic, i.e. I'm from Colombia, Dominican Republic, those Spanish speakers, or black Hispanic, but these share, or, you know, other places where they speak Spanish. But these shares have changed since 2000. Then 93% identify their race ethnicity as black alone. All right. So you got people from other countries. And remember, it wasn't until 1980, right? It wasn't until 1980 that they start coming in here. So now here we are. And remind you, keep in mind, we're talking about the suicide rate. I'm going to convince you guys, I hope, that Black men specifically have been what? Have been taught to deal with this foolishness better than anybody else. All right. So here's the killer right here. While the majority of studies show that African American men are more likely to die by suicide, while African American women are less likely to attempt suicide, the recent research has observed that Caribbean Black men in the U.S. have the highest attempt for the African American community. What does that mean? What does that mean? Recent research has observed that the Caribbean Black men in the U.S. have the highest attempt rate in the African American community. What does that mean? Okay. It is my belief that these Caribbean brothers, unlike African Americans and unlike African Americans, they are not prepared culturally to deal with that. Why? Why? Because the African American culture has taught us how to deal with racism. We came out of slavery and we built things. Those things, yeah, those countries, those towns were burned down, but we built things straight out of slavery. We were better equipped to deal with it. It's coming out of slavery, those Africans who came out of slavery in 1865, they built all these Black colleges by the 1880s, Southern University over in Baton Rouge, 15 years later, the whole system. You got Grambling State University that popped up in 1901. They built things. They were the craftsmen. They were all these different, they were home builders. They built churches. They built towns. They had industries. It's coming out of being free was basically like letting the bull out of the shop. Now you can uncoop me. And so this is, we were married, we raised children. You know, we had the most married group of people in America. Afro-Caribbean culture, by contrast, is different. See, Black American culture, what? Yeah, we can be cruel. We can be clannish. We can be prone to violence. You know, we lack a central community control because they would kill our leaders and our institutions would be destroyed. It's matriarchal because it's posed as non-threatening. Where if you look at Caribbean culture, what do they have? They got family oriented. They got little individual importance. In other words, the family first. They get a lot of praise and reward. You don't believe me? Go down there to some of these Caribbean countries and see how some of these men are treated. Go to some of these Caribbean houses and see how well these Caribbean men, they get to sit back. You know what I mean? These brothers get treated well. They get treated like they're babies almost. They get catered to. Black American men don't receive that. We don't live in a patriarchal environment. In Jamaica, in Haiti, and I got some guys who are from those countries, they have a patriarchal society. Here, a strong Black man gets his head knocked off. He gets challenged. So by our culture has evolved this way. Why? Because it's there to make sure we are able to survive, and that's why we're surviving. Now, it doesn't matter if you agree with me or not. It doesn't matter if you like what I'm saying or not. I'm simply pointing it out. Now, so let's move forward. A culture fails them and it meant, so what happens when a Caribbean person comes to the United States? They get fronted head on with that racism. They're no longer Jamaican. They're no longer Haitian. They're just another N-word to the average cop or the average Black person, subject to all the stereotypes. It doesn't matter that they have a funny accent. It doesn't matter at all. They still get treated like the typical N-word. And so how do they respond? They're not prepared for it because their culture has not prepared for it. They're ill-equipped to deal with the dominant society of the United States. All right. Now, let's go back in history and listen to one of my favorites. This is Dr. Amos, who is a brilliant professor. Let's see if we can run this back real quick. And he explains culture. This is Dr. Amos Wilson. I want you guys to check this out.
Not at all. But it means then
Make sure you get the likes up, hit the like button. If you like what I'm doing, you like where I'm going with it, or you're learning something, make sure you hit the like button. I need you guys to show your appreciation for this hard work. I've been putting this presentation together for a week now. Hit the like button. Also contribute to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal. Here we go.
That while maintaining those traditions, we also must enhance other aspects of our personality. We want to look a bit at culture. What is culture? And we should ask this again. I admire Chancellor Williams very much. And I think the destruction of Black civilization, of course, is a magnificent book. And I've said many times, though, I think many people read it incorrectly. They read it as history, which it really is not per se. It is, as he stated very clearly, a set of case studies. An analysis of African culture and of African history with the question in mind, in what way did these cultures or this history advance our interests as a people, African culture, what way did this history fail us? And of African history as a people as well. And we have to look at the question in mind, in what way, what were the problems represented by African cultures such that we permitted ourselves to be overrun by Europeans, and we find ourselves in the situation that.
All right, so what he's basically telling you is that when you read Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization, he's basically saying it's a body of work that explains African culture at the time and what went wrong. See, a lot of folks will tell you, oh yeah, we need to go back to Africa, we need to live like the Africans live, we need to adopt their religious and spiritual beliefs and those things, but that failed. Why would we go back to something that failed? Why would we go back to a culture that allowed us or accepted the fact that we would turn on each other for money, we would allow our country to be overrun, our countries to be overrun, be compelled to sell our own people into slavery? Why would we go back to something like that? This is what Dr. Amos Wilson is saying when he's saying Dr. Chancellor Williams was basically giving you the destruction of Black civilization, not as a history book, but so that you would learn why the hell you shouldn't go back to that. These are the mistakes you made. So we got a lot of these back to Africa people. I see them with their dashikis on. I get it. It sounds good. It's romantic. We romanticize it. Just like we got a lot of these back to Africa people. I see them with their dashikis on. I get it. You know, it sounds good until you realize they failed. They got overrun by other civilizations that were better prepared. You know, this is what Dr. Amos Wilson said. So let's continue listening to Dr. Amos Wilson when he describes culture, because it's important. He describes the purpose of culture, and as this chart up here, what composes culture: language, manners, interacting, thoughts, values, expected behaviors, practices, relationship, customs, roles, rituals, courtesies, and communication, right? This is your culture, right? So let's continue to listen.
We find ourselves tonight. Understand? It's no insult for us to ask that question of ourselves. And it's no insult for us to look critically at African history and culture and to be critical of it. It is only through our being critical of our history and our culture that we can advance our interests as a people and survive as a people. Looking at the question, what is culture? Horton and Hunt said from their life experiences, a group develops a set of rules and procedures for meeting their needs. The set of rules and procedures, together with a supporting set of ideas and values, is called a culture to a great extent.
So your culture, what? Meets your needs. What are the needs of African Americans in this racist culture that targets Black men? What are your needs in this racist culture that targets Black men? In order for you to succeed, we have a culture which everybody complains about. You get Black folks from other countries, they are always complaining about what? Black American culture. Y'all so violent. Y'all not family oriented. Y'all this, y'all that. This culture developed so that we can be successful. And when they come with their culture, with their family orientedness and their food and their dances and their different way, that culture runs across the dominant society, which sees them as what? As the same person that they see us as. And they're not prepared to deal with it, which is why I believe they have a higher suicide rate, because they're not prepared, especially our West Indian brothers. I think there's an exception for our African brothers from the West Coast, or from our African group, because they've dealt with colonization. They have been overrun by Europeans. They've been subjected. And on top of that, the competition just to get out of Africa, just to get out of a place like Nigeria. There's millions of people there. Everybody, well, not everybody, but many people want to immigrate to a Western country like England or Great Britain or the United States or Canada. And so they have to deal with a certain level of racism. So when they get here, it's a little different. And on top of that, they have no money, because many of them immigrate here and they come from families who are successful. Oftentimes, they're the most educated group of people to come here, which means they're already older, well-versed in practice. Whereas our Caribbean brothers, they come up here from these loving families and they're nurtured and cared for and fed this good food and told how handsome they are. They don't get treated like we get treated as Black American men. So they're not ready to deal with the hostility. But let's continue listening to Dr. Amos Wilson.
To the extent you see a culture involves a set of rules and a procedure for meeting needs. And this is the thing we have to keep in mind. You don't have a culture just to have a culture. And you don't claim a culture just because it's a culture or just because it's African. The ultimate thing that culture must do is solve problems. Mm-hmm. That's why people evolve a culture. That's why culture comes into existence as a way of what? Solving problems and meeting needs. That's why at a certain point, when a culture no longer meets the needs of a people or solves the problem confronting a people, that culture must be transformed. There's nothing sacred about holding a culture in the face of, new events and new changes.
All right, so what is Dr. Amos Wilson saying? He's saying at some point, when a culture no longer serves the needs of the people of that culture, it must change. Because what happens if the culture doesn't change? The people will then die. All right, so what we have right now, fellas, what's going on right now with the clash of the matriarchal culture, the Black community versus the manosphere, is a sea change. It's a culture change, and it's happening, and you're watching it happen. The culture that we had is no longer sustainable. It no longer meets our needs, because it got Black men to a certain point where we're successful. But now these successful Black men are saying, hey, I'm not marrying a matriarchal, belligerent woman to continue on with my relationship. I'm not doing that. We must change. And we're not going to go, and a lot of African scholars would say, well, Africans were egalitarian. They were this, they were that. That failed, because what happened was there were a lot of men from patriarchal societies, be it Arabic speaking or Muslim or European men, who came down and invaded our more egalitarian, matriarchal, tilted populations with those cultures, and we were annihilated. And so that culture failed. So, remember, culture solves problems, and they're here to meet our needs. And when they don't, then they have to change, or the people will perish. All right, let's continue.
Unless, of course, you're free to do that if you're willing also to accept suicide or death. And you have that right to that choice. I tell people, we have the right to say, look, we're going to hold.
Let me know if you can hear this. If you appreciate what I'm doing, hit the number 1 button.
Hold on to this culture, even if it kills us. But we should be what? Very conscious of our decision. We should not be holding on to it out of a misunderstanding of what culture is supposed to do. Ultimately, culture is supposed to solve problems and to meet the needs of the people. And a culture then has to be measured against those standards. Does this culture meet our needs? Does it solve our problems? Chancellor Williams, in a sense, then looked at the African cultures, looked at African characteristics, and looked at them in terms of in what way did they meet our needs, and in what way did they deal with the slave trade and colonialism and the other kind of things that happened to us as African people. And after going through that, then he set up what? The plan, which a lot of people don't read, which is the whole point of what? This is the whole point of the book. Not the first part, but really the second part. Looking at our culture and our history critically, and looking at our situation and where we are today as a result of that history and of those cultures, he then draws out a map for a plan, a way for us to what? Get out of our situation and to restore African civilization and to restore African people. But it's at that point most people sort of move on to something else. This is the place you must study. We're going to include that in our power studies, by the way. That plan along with some others.
So
the sets and rules and procedures.
So look, we talked about on this page, we've talked about the Wolof kingdom. We've talked about so many other stories. Who else did we bring up? We've talked about, let me give you some names. My God, King Antonio of the Congo. We've talked about Mansa Musa. We've talked about Abdullah ibn Yassin. We've talked about all these different great Black men and their cultures. And we've talked about the failures of their cultures when confronted by the European enslavers and the Arab enslavers and Islam, which also came in. We've talked about it. Those same people who worship those African deities, these same people who worship, had their traditional African beliefs, those people were captured, enslaved, and sent to the United States. Those people, even the ones who were doing the capturing, they weren't preserved by their culture. Their culture didn't answer questions. Their culture didn't create a ban on people from grabbing them and shipping them over here. That culture failed. That's what he's saying. It didn't do anything about slavery. It didn't do anything about us being overrun by Europeans. It didn't do anything about us turning our back on each other. This is what Dr. Amos Wilson is saying. And he's also referring to Dr. Chancellor Wilson's book and saying, hey, well, this is what we can do to restore African civilization. And that'll be a point of another lesson. But the whole point I'm telling you guys is there's a reason why your culture is the way it is right now as African-American men. Let's continue to listen.
Just together with a supporting set of ideas. Cultures are not just ways people sing and dance and what they eat and how they dress and the rituals and so forth that they perform. These ways of behaving and dressing and so forth are based on sets of ideas and values. And ultimately, in a deeper sense, it's this set of ideals and values that lay the basis for culture. Cluckhorn and anthropologists indicated that culture is all the, and he defined culture as all the historically created designs for living, explicit and implicit, rational, irrational, and non-rational, which may exist at any given time as a potential guide, as potential guides for the behavior of man, for the behavior of a people. In other words, culture creates designs as a result of its history for living and provides guides for its members, guides for behaving. As a set of the guides for designing, for guiding the behavior of its members, a culture provides standards of proper cognitive, emotional, and behavioral conduct.
All right.
Culture provides a set of norms and concepts of what is to be expected to exist, why we expect them to exist.
Okay, so basically, let's go through this thing. Language, manners of interacting. How do Black men interact with each other as opposed to how they interact with people from other ethnic groups? How do Black men and Black women interact with each other when it's just us around? Right? How do we do that? How do we interact? This is all part of our culture. what value system do we have? Why do we value this over that? Why do we value, what is our expected behavior if, let's say somebody sees, I asked the question once, I said, if you saw 3 cops beating up a black woman, would you jump in? You guys said, yeah, of course I would. 3 white cops beating up, but why is that? What about that if that person was some kind of rapist or pedophile, even though they're black? Then you, oh, well, but your first inclination is what? You're expected to jump in, okay? Relationships, how you interact with your mother. Why is it that the black woman is the sacred cow in the black community? Why is that? This is a question. Because part of the culture is to have a matriarchal culture. Let her be in charge, because then you seem less of a threat to the dominant culture, which is a patriarchal culture. Why is that? What rituals and roles, you know, the churches, and why is it that we always have to seem so harmless? You know, even though we can exercise our most violent tendencies in the boxing ring and in the football stadium, outside of the ring, we're expected to be harmless as a dove. Otherwise, we get vilified for even showing some semblance of masculinity, even in the most benign, unthreatening forms. See, this is part of our culture. This is how we survive as African American men. Let's continue listening.
Though culture is a product of actual experience, culture is essentially ideological, meaning that it essentially exists in the mind, because culture ultimately is based on the sharing of beliefs and customs and expectations. We receive our culture as a result of, as a part of our social heritage. To the degree that the individual identifies or is at one with this culture, and to the degree to which the members of a culture identify with it, culture is represented in the minds of its people.
So you can have a black man from Atlanta, and you can have a black man from Jamaica, and they can look like they could be brothers or cousins, okay? But they have a different culture. One is Jamaican, one is Black American. So he's going to, his mannerisms and interacting are going to be different. His value systems are going to be different. His expected behaviors are going to be different. His relationships with his peer group is going to be different, especially if he's fresh from that culture and hadn't been worked into the American culture and Americanized. So when confronted with this, and the people who teach him, the people in his family are going to have instilled those same cultural beliefs in him. So now when he's confronted with members of the dominant society who treat him as though he was simply another African American, a black man, an ADOS, FDA, he's going to have a different response. He's not going to be prepared to deal with that, right? This is why I believe that you have a higher suicide rate amongst our Caribbean brothers, because they're not prepared to deal with that. In addition, family, this is why you have a higher, as it points out right there, in face of that, you have more black men succeeding because we're prepared to deal with this culture. We've been built. So everything that we complain about in this culture, everything that others come over to this United States to complain about, oh, you black Americans are this, you black Americans are that. It is us. This is a way in which we have developed so that we can succeed. This is why we've been able to exist in this country since 1619 and succeed. This is why when other Africans, aside from our Nigerian brothers, because they are doing well, they do exceedingly well, especially our Nigerian brothers. This is why when they come here, you know, they are so successful because they obviously have a similar culture, or it could be, and I'm just hypothesizing at this point, because they're such in small numbers, they haven't got to that point yet. But our Caribbean brothers with their culture are clearly having a hard time. Let's listen for a little while longer and then we'll open up the chat.
In other words, we have to recognize deeply that culture cannot exist outside of ourselves. It only can exist in our minds and in our bodies as a people. And therefore, to a great extent, it is ideological more than it is physical, more than it is behavioral, more than it is just ways of dressing. Ultimately, a culture must be represented in the very minds of a people. And it is only through its representation as a mental entity that a people can identify with the culture. A culture is a way of thinking, a way of attending the world, of perceiving the world, of classifying and categorizing the world, of ordering the world, of processing information, and of evaluating the world. When we say then that the Europeans decultured us or distorted our culture, we are also saying then that the Europeans have distorted our modes of attending the world.
All right, so Europeans took Africans from the African continent, where we had our own spiritual beliefs. They brought us where we were blacksmith, we were landowners, we were scientists, we were all these different people. They took us, and then they removed us and brought us here to the United States, where we were basically forced slave labor. And so a culture changed. The culture went from that to what it is now. And what it is now is a manifestation of years and years of slavery and Jim Crow and being specifically targeted. So we have developed a way to succeed in this culture. I think this is a good explanation. You know, I'm going to continue on with this, but it's a reason why Black American men are succeeding against all odds. And it's Black American men. This is why we're succeeding. Now, I'm not saying that none of our Caribbean brothers succeed. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this culture that we have, if they fall in line, will do what? It allows them to be successful. See, a lot of our Caribbean brothers and African brothers, they come over here and benefit from our culture. They benefit from the hard work that we put in. They'll write in there, oh, I'm Black American, when in actuality, they're not ADOS and they're not FDA. They do it all the time. That's why when you go to some of these colleges, you know, you see where it says these kids, they get admitted to all these major colleges. Oftentimes, those are people of African and Nigerian and, you know, Ghanaian, West Indian, whatever heritage. They're not necessarily American descendants of slaves, but they're benefiting from what we've laid out. They benefit from it, and they get to basically run to the front of the line. And it's human nature is what people do. They take advantage of what's available to them. I get it. But for those who always are knocking Black American culture, remember, it's been our survival mechanism. It's the reason why we're able to succeed. Some of the things that they call dysfunctional actually work in the United States to make us successful. Like, for instance, Black Americans are individualistic. We don't need to, you know, live with our families until we're, you know, 45 years old. Why? We get pushed out early on, and it causes us what? We don't even have that expectation that we're going to live with them a long time. But in other cultures, they do. There are cultures around the world. Kids live with their parents until they get married, which is unheard of in the Black community. You got Black boys being pushed out the house at 14, 15 years old, and they have to get out there and sink or swim. Anybody who wants to join in this conversation, come on in. You know, here's another thing, the coddling that these young Black boys who come in from, let's say, I'm very familiar with the Latino culture. So let's talk about the Colombians and the Dominicans. They coddle these young boys. These young boys come up here and they get treated like kings, and they get treated, any of you guys who've ever dated a Latino woman, you know, they will baby you all the way up. Your African mothers, your African American mothers, on the other hand, are not about that life. They are not going to baby you. They're going to kick you, and they're going to get you up out of there, because if they coddle you too much, you will not be prepared to deal with the racism that you deal with in this dominant society. And so this is why I believe, right, and I'm going to put this back up here, when confronted with the harsh reality that the dominant society has to offer, many of our Caribbean Black men in the U.S. are not prepared to deal with it, which is why they have had, according to this, a recent research has observed Caribbean Black men in the U.S. have the highest attempt rate for the African American community because their culture is different. Anybody who wants to join in, come on in. The link is in the chat room. Please contribute to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal. We have over 200 people in the chat room. We got 151 likes. Get the likes up. Hit the likes right now. All the references that I'm talking about are right below in the description section. Go ahead and check them out. I asked you guys to check out the rest of what Dr. Amos Wilson has to say. It was very interesting, that read. I've been listening to him now for probably, oh my God, since I was in undergrad or before, you know. But Afro Patriarch, man, you're up, man. Welcome. I'm so happy you're here. I would like you to give me your take on this presentation, if you will.
Well, I think you know partly my story. At 17, I was a teen suicide survivor, and you know, I'm Haitian, and it was because of a lot of things, the environment, and also not understanding the level of my masculinity, and because my father died early, and the racism I was dealing with.
Right.
And I will say it again, and I say it all the time, it was an ADOS man that saved my life.
Tell us how he saved your life. What did he? And I know it's going to sound sterile. Okay, this is sterile, but I'm approaching this from a science perspective. He attuned you to American. He attuned you to the American, Black American culture. I'm assuming that you needed to go ahead and understand so that you could then survive in this country, being a young man of Haitian descent, growing up in that Caribbean family. But go ahead, brother. But what did he say to you?
We didn't have any racial philosophy, especially being Haitian, which is shocking, right?
Yeah.
My father, he was dealing with racism when I was like a little small child, and my mom didn't understand. You know, because my mom is a Haitian woman, so she wasn't really getting the same level of animosity. Like my father was a cab driver.
Say that again. Your mother was not dealing with the same level because she's a Black American woman, right?
Haitian.
I know, but she's Haitian, but they perceive her as Black American. So there's a little bit more protection for her. But as a Black man, you're specifically targeted. Your father was. Now tell us, he was a Haitian cab driver. So so just laying out the perspective, he was dealing with the public. You see what I'm saying?
He was dealing with the public. He was dealing with with all forms, Latin and Black criminality, the dark side of our society, and he was dealing with the police. He was dealing with the bourgeoisie, the white bourgeoisie of the society. He was dealing with it all, and it takes a psychological toll on you.
Yeah,
you know,
and he was as a Haitian man. He grew up in Haiti, I presume, right?
Yeah, and it's a different environment. It's a totally different environment. You're taught that you own this society. You own this society. So you walk down the street, men nod at you, other men smile at you. When they do that, there's no animosity or any type of, it's just genuine. Hey, brother, how you doing? And everybody's walking by, minding their own business. I don't think a lot of Haitians know how coddled we are by our environment on the island, because for every amount of chaos that the world says that's going on in Haiti, it's very civil, extremely civil. So just like Ghana, just like Nigeria. But you may hear something going on, but happening at 3% of a location, but the rest of the country is still moving on and very peaceful. It's very peaceful. So, when I was living in Haiti as a child, I lived comfortably. I lived extremely comfortably. I saw men get up every day and lead the country, as best as they could. And especially with the circumstances. I saw Black male leaders every day. women were feminine. I was coddled. I was a black man, a black boy, and I was coddled because I was going to be a black man. So they saw me as someone who's going to be a future leader. So when I come back home to America, I'm growing up in an environment, not yet knowing that I am a black child in America. Is when I become a teenager. Start having muscles. I have height. My skin is dark.
Yeah.
I'm now being bombarded with aggression or fear, and I'm from not only from from black side, because you know how we look at each other if we're walking down the street. What's your colors? You know what I mean, bruh? Like, you know what I mean. So you're dealing with that, and then after that, so you think it's so Haitians will say, oh well, it's just the African Americans. No, it's then you get it from the Jamaicans, and then you get it from other groups, because we're looking at each other's skin tone and are muscular, and we're checking each other. Yo, where you from, bruh? What you up to in my neighborhood? So we're sizing each other up, and then now I cross over to the white area. Now this is where I meet real aggression, real suspicion. You know what I mean? Real, like, yo, don't come around here, boy. And this is New York City. You know what I'm saying? Howard Beach.
If I can
Staten Island.
If I can explain it to the audience, basically you came from a healthy culture, which breeds their young boys up to be masculine, patriarchal men who lead the family, coming from Haiti. Then you arrive in the United States, where masculine, manly, patriarchal men are seen as a threat. Black men, that is. They're seen as a threat, and they're knocked down whenever possible. They're called uppity, or they're called all these different names.
Exactly.
So this is what you were confronted with. We as Black American men have been brought up in this system, and we're able to slide and become successful. That's why in this article here, it sneakily said that they become successful through all sorts of means, that these men have traveled routes into the middle class that can be replicated, but it wasn't easy. You see what I'm saying?
It wasn't easy.
Yeah,
to me, I was being bombarded in high school with all this, and my world is being flipped upside down because the things that my parents and my family members are telling me, and these are people who did well. These are people who did well. Nurses. A lot of them are nurses. A lot of them are doctors and lawyers. They're doing well in their lives, but they don't understand that they had to go through Europe. They had to go through Canada to get their degrees. And then they come to America, and now they have this bourgeoisie attitude, and they're like, nah, man, you'll be fine. And I'm sitting there and I'm dealing with what African Americans, me and all my cousins are dealing with. What Africans, we are living the same, in the outside world, we're living the same troubles as African Americans, but we don't have any of the mechanisms to deal with them.
I say you haven't had those tables, you haven't had those conversations at the living room table with your great grandma, and grandfather, and uncles who grew up in Mississippi or Alabama.
They just didn't understand. They just didn't understand.
And see, that's why, man, I'm telling you, and I'm glad you're here. It's why when Black Americans say, y'all gonna learn, and I'm not talking to you, when Blacks come from other countries like Nigeria, Caribbean, we say stuff like, see, y'all haven't had y'all Negro wake-up call. There's a reason why we are the way we are. There's a reason why we can be cruel. There's a reason why Black Americans can be clannish. There's a reason why we can be prone to violence. Because see, if you run across one of those white boys in Staten Island that show you that aggression, we understand that we have to respond with that aggression. Oftentimes, you wonder why we burn up stuff. You wonder why this happens. Oh my God, this is crazy. They burn, because this is something that grew out of our culture. This is the violence.
Yeah, it was Amos men. It was Amos men who instilled it in me. Yeah. After I tried to attempt suicide, I went to a teenage adolescent asylum. And Dennis, there's so many kids of color in there. There's so many kids of color in there, and and it was Amos men who were, working there, who were leading meetings, instilling that in me. And then after I had a psychiatrist, after I left, I got out, I had a psychiatrist who was Amos man, who really aggressively pumped into me that you can survive.
Right.
You can win. You can succeed. And I mean, I was a mess. I was an emotional mess. I mean, crying every other moment, scared out of my mind about the future. I was afraid, man. And my mom was talking about sending me back to sending me out of the country. And she was like, "No, you can win. You can succeed. It's not going to be easy." Yeah. And he gave me books on American black men who Amos men who succeeded, who went through far worse than I was going through, who went through far worse, and they won. They won.
So I'm gonna ask you one more question, then I'm gonna go to Malika, and then we got a new person in here called EB. I want to ask you this, and this is gonna be a little bit personal, but your mother, who was a Haitian woman, your father was a Haitian man. Mm-hmm. Your mother and your father grew up in Haiti, so they had certain expectations based on their Haitian culture and what they experienced. Your mother was obviously having an easier time at it than your father. Did you notice any complaints from your mother to your father or your father to your mother where they would get in arguments because she didn't understand what he was going through?
Sometimes my father would lash out physically. And I mean, as a child, you don't understand. But then when I got my Negro wake-up call, I understand exactly what he was dealing with. Exactly. You come here, you're well-mannered, you're respectful, and then the society, the mainstream society shits on you, shits on your humanity, shits on your goals for your family. And it just tears you down. And then you have a woman who doesn't really know, doesn't really get it. She's living comfortably. She's working, though she's a working woman. She's living technically under the umbrella as a woman, and no one's really messing with her the way that I'm sure she got messed with different ways, sexual harassment, things like that. But she's not dealing with threats to her life every day, like my father and his best friends and my uncles were. They were dealing with real things like the threats to their life from all surrounding them. They never dealt with that before. Yeah. So it was African, again, Amos men schooling my dad. My dad began to start talking very pro-black male. I remember at 7, 8 years old, talking pro-black male, and my mom just thought it was all rhetoric. She just thought it was all rhetoric. And he's sounding like the things that I've heard from out of Louis Farrakhan and things like that. My father was listening to those things. Right. You know what I'm saying? To give him purpose, to strengthen him and make him understand this society. So again, it was Amos men leading the way to help give other men of other black ethnicities purpose in a blueprint to survive and succeed in America.
Like I said, before 1980, there was not a lot of Black American. There was not a lot of Africans in this country. We went from 800,000 to now over 4 million. And that's because Black men have led the way. We've shown people how to cut through this sea of racism and be successful. And so I'm glad you're honest, Afro-patriarch, and you acknowledge that. And again, this is why I tell you, Black men, that only Black men really understand what other Black men are going through. This woman, Afro-patriarch's mom and his dad, she didn't understand what he was dealing with. No different than African-American women here in this country who are treated differently. There is a place for Black American women in this country. Black American men, not so much. And along with those threats to Afro-patriarch's life, I'm sure there was jabs at his masculinity his father, there's jabs at his masculinity, belittling those sort of things. This is what he had to deal with. And so, I'm telling you guys, the culture that we have, we complain about, oh, this. but it's here for a reason. Now we've gotten to the point we've maximized the benefit of this culture, Malika. We've maximized the benefit that this culture can bring us. And so we're now at the point where the culture is changing. Now, Malika, before you get started, we got two guys in here. I want to make sure we're going to do a troll check real quick. I'll be right back. EV, introduce yourself. How can I help?
I hate that, Dennis.
Okay, cool. I'm going to go back to Malika, but we got another one. Roger, introduce yourself. Roger, introduce yourself.
What's going on, Mr.
All right,
Roger?
Get a little troll check. Okay, so Malika, you understand now? Yeah, I get it. We got this horrible culture here amongst Black Americans. We are violent. We shooting each other. We clannish. We're prone to violence. We eat bad. Our women are aggressive. Blah, 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 blah. But do you understand why it evolved that way? Now, because it answers questions. You understand now? We're looking at it. We're not looking, remember, and this is going to be hard for all my red pill brother. Hey, man, these women are mannish and blah, blah, blah. I get it. I understand. You brothers around here, hey, they simple. I get it. I understand. Malika, I get it. Yell and scream at me if you want to, Malika. I get it. Because all last week you've been saying this, and now here you are saying this. But we have to look at it for what it is, Malika. You understand what I'm saying? So do you understand why our culture is the way, why it evolved this way? And why now it's beginning to change in the conflict that we're having in the culture? Your thoughts, sir?
Definitely. If we're talking about how the way we were treated through antebellum slavery and coming out of slavery through Reconstruction and going through Jim Crow and going all the way up through the Black Power movement, through civil rights and up to now, ADO's Black people, or whatever terminology we're going to call it, we've been tempered in a certain way that we have this certain mentality and attitude. You know, like the brother Afro patriarch, his family are immigrants and they have a different mindset when they come over here. And, you know, when we're used to being our ancestors and our grandmothers and great grandmothers and grandfathers, they're used to seeing a sign that says colored here and white there. We're used to putting our hand up and wanting a cab and 20 cabs passes by.
How does that affect somebody who's used to being treated with dignity and respect? They come over here from Haiti, they come over here from Jamaica, where respect is the thing, and now you go to New York and you treat it like trash. You come from a country, you're from the Dominican Republic where men are revered and treated with respect, and you come, even if you're a taxi driver, and you come to the United States and you're treated like the lowest of the low, even though you got a hard-working job and everything that worked there doesn't work here. What effect does that have on a man's psyche?
That's a culture shock. It makes a man feel, perfect example, it doesn't make him feel like he's a man. It doesn't make him feel like he can operate as a man.
Can I add this in? Because I want to interject this. Respect is the currency of manhood.
Exactly.
Respect is the currency of masculinity. When a man is not respected, when a man feels you disrespected him, he will do something to you. There's a time when you can look at a man wrong and that's disrespect, and he might pop you. You could step on a man's shoes in the club back in the day and he might slice you up, because this is the extent to which a man will go to receive respect from other men. So when you have a man who receives respect from other men, that's really a real man. So yes, in a situation where you got a man who's used to respect and he's being overtly and openly disrespected by everybody pretty much in the society, then how is that man gonna feel, Malika? That's what I wanted to add to you guys. This is why respect. For instance, ladies, attention, you love attention, you take your clothes off on Instagram for attention, for likes. Men feel the same way about respect. We'll do damn near anything for respect. So when a man is disrespected and over again, what does that do to him? And that's what Malika's talking about. But go ahead, Malika, pick up where you left off. Contribute to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal if you're enjoying this conversation. But go ahead, Malika.
To piggyback off on the respect aspect, wide world and internationally, men thrive for that. But here in America, and especially for Black men, you have to earn that thing like you trying to earn a gold medal. And it's not just overly, it's just, you know, that from a little boy, and especially if you grew up in the hood, you cannot show weakness. You cannot show weakness around women. You damn sure can't show weakness around the men that you're with. And this comes ingrained to us. And as you go through this and you go through life, and especially if you're trying to make it, just trying to make your mark, it's about gaining the respect. And when it comes to dealing with our women, and especially our lovely ladies who have an advantage over us because they're protected.
Right.
They have the ability to make a life for themselves, even if they don't want to go get an education. They have a system that protects them and allows that.
Yeah.
So they can still look down their nose at us when, if you have a man who's working hard, he's going against the grain to get an education, he's going against the grain to get a job, he's going to get a grain if he's a man like me who had a job, lost his job, went to prison, got back out. He got an education, but he's still trying to make his way into the system, but he still has a dark cloud over his head, but he's still forging and pushing through. And at the same time, you tell women, you say, I'm trying to do my best, but there's this, this, and this. And they can somewhat empathize with you, but they can't understand how you're still looked upon as disrespected. And also as a Black man, you're looked upon as being disrespected, and you're still trying to push through, and they're saying, well, hold your head up.
Right.
That's easy for you to say because you don't have to deal with the burdens that we have. And not complaining is just saying what we deal with. The hardship, the struggle, the just the day to day. And this is starting from a child going up to a grown man, where you're supposed to keep your head up.
Yeah.
I don't care what's going on. You have to do this.
And see, you know, the thing is, man, they don't understand. Like, the culture that Black Americans have developed in this country is perfect for this country and the society that we live in. It's what has kept us alive. It is what has allowed us to maintain and not only do what? Thrive in a society. Again, Black men have learned to succeed in a system that was designed for us to fail. Mm-hmm. And so that needs analysis. The fact that we have slowly become, you know, a group of men where with all the obstacles in our way, over 82% of us have reached middle class or have become rich. That's what the statistics are saying. This is not Dennis Sperling saying this. This is just Dennis Sperling, Uncle D, if you guys want to call me that, bringing this information to you as represented in these documents that I push forward. So kudos to you, Black men. I want to get to EV. EV, thank you for patiently waiting. Please unmute yourself. And let's go ahead and you guys, if you appreciate this conversation, if you appreciate the level of discourse, you know, if I'm adding to your life, if I'm giving you something to think about, if I'm making you feel proud of yourself and your people and what you've accomplished, make sure you add and show your appreciation by contributing to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal. I don't want to run any commercials, but I want to know that you appreciate what I'm doing by giving you $5, $10, $100, whatever. You're not going to get this level of conversation, or they're going to talk about Quavos, Sweetie. Who else are they going to talk about? Malika. They're going to talk about Cardi B. They're going to talk about all this, but what they're not going to do is bring you a dissertation by Dr. Amos Wilson and explain to you why it applies to you right now. Okay, so make sure you contribute to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal. I will make sure I give you a shout out if you do. I want to give an acknowledgement before we go to EV. Thank you, Toot Trev 211. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's the only Cash App we've got. EV, what are your thoughts on this conversation? What do you have to add to it? Why are Black men succeeding in America? Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. That's what I want to hear you and Roger and Randall say before I get off. Tell me I'm wrong and why I'm wrong. I'm saying our culture has evolved to make sure that we as Black men has taught us to succeed in a system that's designed for us to fail. And that's why there's a difference between our brothers who come here from the West Indies, who come here from the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, Belize. This is why they're killing themselves when they get confronted with it, like Afro Patriarch gave us his excellent, basically verifying what I'm saying. Why is it, EV? Tell me I'm wrong. I want to know. What's your theory?
I come from a black immigrant background. My parents are Nigerian. They're both Nigerian. My father came here late 70s, early 80s.
Late 70s, early 80s. Okay.
Yeah. For the most part, he really didn't talk about race at all.
Right.
He never really talked about race. He talked about race maybe a little bit. He said during medical school, the one of the professors, he would look down at the black students when they were passing by him. He said that was one thing he said. That was some racism he encountered. He said that when he was doing like an internship for school, there was like some employer made him like clean, I think, the floor and stuff when they were really wanting him to, but I don't think that was really racism. I feel that was just that's what they do with like all interns. They make them do the shit stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah, we want to watch our language. Yeah, no problem. Go ahead.
Do the garbage, things that aren't really pertaining to the real content of the internship. So I'm not gonna say that was racism, but yeah, he didn't really talk too much about race in the house and stuff. But I feel that the difference between us, people from Africa, the West Indies, and African Americans is that we tend to not be so hypersensitive on race. It's that there is racism. My dad said, yeah, he sees racism, but what's the point of making like a fuss about it?
So let me ask you a couple of questions because I want to lay a better background. Your father, how old was he when he immigrated to this country?
Like 19, 20.
Okay, so he basically already was a grown man. He'd established himself in Nigeria as a grown. Did he have education before he got here?
He came here for an education.
All right. So did he have an education? Was he a learner? Did he have a college degree before he got here?
Not.
Okay. All right. What sort of family background does he have?
Mom, dad.
Oh yeah, but what does your grandfather and your grandmother do? Is kind of what I'm asking.
Okay.
In Nigeria, I'm assuming.
My grandfather, he was born in 1904. I guess he sold palm oil and stuff, hard work.
I'm at the point where your father was born to your grandfather and your grandmother. What class would they be in? Upper middle class, rich, poor? Where would they be?
I would say they would be third world country, struggling. My parents, same thing with my mom. They were third world country, struggling, poor, struggling people. They didn't have educations. They didn't really have educations and stuff. My grandmother, she couldn't speak English. She didn't know how to read or write. So,
all right. So your father, did he immigrate to the United States by himself?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And your mother, what does she do?
She's a nurse. She's yeah.
Did they meet here in the United States?
No, my dad, he went back and got her.
You went back and got her. Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. Nigerian immigrants are one of the most successful ethnic groups in the United States. All right. I'm actually probably going to say that, considering these are the first people, if you look at the DNA, this is one of the first group of people in the United States. I mean, in the world. This is God's first creation. I don't want to get too deep into that, but there's a brilliance that comes from West Africa. This is the place of Mansa Musa. This is the place of the Songhai Empire. These are the same people that we as Americans for the most part, are descended from. There were 6 general regions in West Africa that we came from, and Nigeria, or the country of Nigeria, as it's called today, was one of those. And so there is a brilliance that comes from there, and there's no taking away from there. Here's another thing. They are some of the hardest working people on this planet. Now, the other thing is there's not a whole lot of them here. All right. Now, we say, oh, these Africans, but they're Africans on, Africa is a huge country. It is not a huge continent. It is not a country. You see what I'm saying? So Nigerians, Ghanaians, they're different. Yeah, they're from the continent of Africa, but they're different. And so the number of Nigerians in this country are only 304,000. And so what you get is some people who want to come over here and do extremely well for themselves. And EV, and I'm sure your dad has told you this, you're going to do well if you push and push and push and push, and there's an opportunity there, and you're willing to scrub floors like your dad did, even if you got a medical degree, somebody's going to let you slide in. You see what I'm saying? I get where he's coming from. But see, the thing is, right, he came here at 19 or 20, right, EV?
Yes, he did, yes.
And he already was a grown man, and to be brave enough to go from 19 to 20 to come to, and he was not coddled in Nigeria, was he?
He came from a large family, so I mean,
he came from a third world poor or working class family, and he had to bust his butt to get over here. Am I saying that right?
Yes, nobody
made it easy for him, did they?
No, he had to get people to help pay for the plane tickets. He had to get people to pay for some of his tuition from back in his village. He had to get people. He had to drop out of school because he couldn't afford it, so he had to go and work as a security guard.
Right.
All that stuff.
So by contrast, if you look at some of my brothers from Jamaica and Haiti and the Dominican Republic, they basically live an island life, right? And island life is a little less strenuous, than living over there in Nigeria, just like the difference between the Dominican Republic and Colombia. So what I'm trying to tell you is, man, they dropped a wolf off, and your dad being the wolf, they dropped him in a corral full of dogs, and he out barked. You understand what I'm saying? But it's not Nigerians and Ghanaians that have a higher suicide rate. It's Jamaicans and Haitians and other Caribbean folks from Caribbean islands, because they have a different culture that is more nurturing and caring and whatnot. Nigeria, your dad was just an exceptional man. You understand what I'm saying? And I appreciate him telling you, hey, ignore racism. But you, as a second generation Nigerian, how are you dealing with it?
That's a good question, and I really want to talk about that.
Yeah, because there's some studies out there that I'll bring up, but I understand how many of the second generation, and especially the third generation Africans, especially West Africans, are dealing with it. But go ahead, tell us
racism,
how you're dealing with it.
For me specifically, I grew up in a very, very white environment. Very, very white environment. Well, not very, but it was whites, Asians, Middle Easterners. There were black people in there, but
was it? Let me just ask you for a region. Is it up north, back east, northeast, down south?
Mid-Atlantic.
Mid-Atlantic. Okay, cool. Go ahead.
For me, racism for me is not a big deal. For me personally, I don't see it as a big deal. I'm saying that because I've found it's not just from a race consciousness that I've gotten to this point, but almost a self-confidence that I really don't care what other people think about me, right? No, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do and what I want to accomplish in my life. I really could care less about how a Latino person feels about me, how a white person feels about, how an Asian person feels about me. I'm gonna do what I need to do. And I feel that that's the reason why a lot of we as Black people here in America, African Americans, I consider myself African American. Well, Yeah, I guess I consider myself African. I was born and raised here. We don't tend to do as much. I guess we falter a little bit in that we put our confidence into other groups of people when all we need to do is put confidence into ourselves and the people.
So I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions if you don't mind. What's your general? Are you between 20 and 30 or 30 and 40?
I'm in my early 20s.
Okay, so your early 20s. Have you finished college?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I just finished.
Yeah. Great. Congratulations. I'm happy to hear that. Now, are you still receiving help from your dad if he was giving you any help at all?
Yes, I'm living at home. Yeah.
So is it fair to say it hadn't quite hit you yet because you still living under your dad's umbrella?
No, racism has hit me to be. I mean, racism.
Tell us how it's affected you or how it's hit you. Tell us what you've experienced.
I mean, microaggressions. Obviously, that's. I mean, I don't really take that too seriously because these people, they don't know who I am.
Can you give us an example? And then I want to get you because I want to get your whole story in. I just want to get to everybody. But go ahead. You guys, if you appreciate what I'm doing, contribute to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal. I want to make sure we get. This is an important topic. We have a brother from Haiti. We got another brother who's a second generation Nigerian. This is so very important for our well-being. We need to have more understanding. So this is why I'm taking the time. It's not boring. Listen, soak all this in, but make sure you contribute to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal. The Cash App is right here. So is the PayPal. Go ahead, EV. Tell us what you've experienced. Give us as much detail as you're comfortable giving us.
Okay. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2", 6'3".
Right.
I was going to get ice cream in the town that I'm from, and there was a few people that felt kind of. There's 3 older white people, right? And they felt kind of, I guess, weirded out maybe by my presence. It seemed like because I was behind them, and one of them, they go and turn to the window, right? They go and turn to this window, right, to go look at the stuff inside the window, and then all of a sudden they all come back and stuff. All of them come back to see what the guy's looking at, right? And then after like I go, right, they go and I guess they go and get off to that window and stop looking at it and stuff. But
how did that make you feel?
It doesn't really affect me because
when you say it doesn't affect you, have you altered your behavior now, knowing how that's how some people will perceive you?
No.
You're a 6'2" black, and I'm assuming you're your brother from the continent, and both of your parents are Nigerian. I'm assuming you're 6'2" African, with the African phenotype. You're dark-skinned brother, large brother. How does that make you feel knowing that people see you as a threat? Physically.
It's not. Again,
does it make you feel good?
Good. It doesn't really. Again,
does it seem? I'm just asking you. Does it make you feel good or bad? What better describes how it makes you feel?
I would say I'm indifferent because again, these people they don't know me.
I get it, but how does it make you feel knowing that they may perceive you as a threat and then they may respond to that?
I feel. I mean, it does make me feel a little bad that people are judging me by my color, but I mean,
that's normal. That's what I just want you to have an honest conversation. Because see, you can't ignore it. Let's. It may not bother you as much as it bothers other people, but let's not ignore it. Now, the other question is, do you think it's unfair that they perceive you as threatening when you haven't done anything to anybody solely because of the color of your skin and your size? Do you think it's unfair for them to judge you like that? EV?
Yes and no. Yes and no.
You don't think it's unfair for them to judge you just because of the color of your skin? You don't think you think that's fair for them to do that?
we often, it's, I guess, in our human nature to go off people's appearances and stuff, you know.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit. Do you think that if you were a 6'2", blonde-haired, blue-eyed linebacker for the, I don't know, Baltimore Ravens, do you think they would perceive you as a threat, those white people, when they saw you?
They probably wouldn't. No, but again,
All right, so then we can pretty much determine that they see you as a threat, not solely because of your height, but because of the color or the darkness of your skin. Do you think that's fair?
No, it's not fair. But no, life's not.
Okay, I get it. Life's not fair. And I get where you're coming from, man. I understand you don't want to see it for what it is. But see, unfortunately, after decades and decades and decades of that unfairness and decades of the treatment that goes along with those perceptions, Black Americans have gotten to the point where, you know, they've had to adapt the culture. Because, see, it's not only that they perceive you as a threat. Had this been several years back, they would have responded to you as a threat. They would have responded to you. They would have clenched their purse in the elevator. They would have locked their doors when you walk by the car. And I understand that you're saying that that doesn't affect you and you're indifferent, and that's great for you. But you remember, you're growing up, and your father was a man who comes from a different culture, who clearly had pride in himself.
Yes,
and he's a successful man. And so he gets the chance to give you the light at the end of the tunnel and say, son, just keep your head down, keep it moving, you'll see. But see, what's going to happen is, Evie, is that you're going to have a son. Hope, God willing, you'll have children, and maybe one of those will be a son. And the more time you all spend in this culture, the more you'll begin to understand why African Americans behave the way they do as far as the culture. There was a time when all of us were first or second generation immigrants from Africa. And over time, we've developed the culture that we have now. And there's a reason for it. It's not because there's anything inherently defective about African Americans. Obviously, if we're succeeding at the rate that we're succeeding, that says something, right? It says, well, damn, the culture is this toxic and bad, which I say myself, but look at us succeeding. And so we have to look at the culture and analyze and say, well, this is an outcropping of our environmental stimuli. And I appreciate your honesty. Thank you so much, EB. You're welcome back anytime. I think this is your first time here. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And this has been very enlightening to everybody. Okay?
No
All
problem.
right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Roger, you and Randall have been patiently waiting. Look, I don't want to run any commercials. I want everybody to contribute to the Super Chat, the Cash App, and the PayPal who wants to contribute and keep this thing going. Roger, what are your thoughts on this conversation, man?
Well, I got several points I want to hit. And, you know, I want to address the Nigerian and the Jamaicans and, you know, why they're the highest rate of suicide. If I'm
It's not the Nigerians. It's not the Nigerians. It's just
Jamaicans.
It just says Caribbean. And Caribbean includes Haitian. It includes Dominican. It includes Jamaican. It doesn't include Nigeria. It says nothing about Nigerians at all. Matter of fact, they're one of the most successful ethnic groups in the United States. So it doesn't say that.
And I'm going to tackle that as well. But let's go down to the highest rate of suicides in the Jamaicans. Now,
and I'm referring to the African American suicide fact sheet based on 2014 data and 26, which reads as follows. Recent research observed that the Caribbean Black men, the U.S. have highest attempt rate of African American community. Go ahead.
And, you know, my parents, I'm also immigrant. My mother is Panamanian. My dad is Jamaican. So, you know. So what happened with these Caribbean countries is these Caribbean countries are predominantly Black. They see Black people all day, and they believe that the source of their problems is Black people. They don't see the white. They don't see the white hand with the velvet glove. So, you know, when you go like to even, let's take Nigeria, for example, you know, why they don't address the racism, because in Nigeria, everything is Black. It's very rare that they see white folks, but we know that white supremacy is a global thing. We know this. We know that there's racism in Nigeria, but the Nigerian cannot see it because everybody around him is black. So whenever he feels pain, he perceives it's coming from a black person, when in actuality, there is a white hand with a velvet glove somewhere. There's always this. There's always this. And in regards to them being the most successful group in America,
the Nigerians. Well, this is what the article's saying, and I believe it because I've heard it before.
Yes, and the reason is this: me being an immigrant, I lived in Panama for 14 years.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: it's not because they're hardest working. I hate that phrase. Mexicans are hard workers. Argentinians are hard workers. Jamaicans are hard workers. Everybody works hard.
Yeah, but they are special. These Nigerians that come here, they are very special.
They're not special.
I went to school with them, bro. They got all the answers to all the math questions.
They're not a needle in a haystack. They're not. They're smart people in every group. Here's the
thing. Brilliant. I'm just telling you, I went to school with. They're brilliant. But go ahead.
And I don't minimize it, but I know Asians, I know white people, I know people who they're smart people in every group. Here's the thing with black folks and Nigerians. The way they get ahead is because how they identify. White folks, before the opportunities comes, once they understand that these people identify as something other than black. That's why
clearly they're black, bro. Look at them. Clearly they're black. You can't get around it.
Mentally.
Okay.
White folks are always trying to see how you mentally identify. Your color means absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing to them. Mentally, they want to see, does he see himself as a Nigerian or he sees himself as a black person? Because that's the two different things now. As long
so you saying that, are you? I want to clarify. You're saying that white people don't see these people on this screen as black?
What I'm saying is this: the color means nothing. How
so white people.
I don't care if there could be black. I'm gonna use me as an example. My language, my predominant language is Spanish. Now I was in the military. Whenever I speak Spanish, the white folks always, "Oh, you're Hispanic," but I'm dark as the people in this picture. They're always trying to separate you.
All right. So I'm gonna tell you a story. There was in this section that I read here, I specifically said that we as Black Americans are different than other members of the African American diaspora. We as Black American men and women, but specifically men, have been specifically targeted by the race-dominant society. So basically what you're saying and what I'm saying is there's a story, I forget the sister's name, but she would go to these pre-1950s segregated places and speak French. And when she would speak French, they would treat her differently. And that's why I say in the earlier dissertation that we're specifically targeted. So what you're saying is that white people see these black folks as different. And so they easing up on them. They're not treating them like they treat Black Americans. That's why when I pointed out that the two highest officials in the U.S. government today are of African descent, are either Kenyan and Jamaican, because they treat them different. I think that's what is that what you're saying? Because that's what I hit on earlier. But go ahead. I think that's what you're coming from. But go ahead. You speak Spanish, they perceive you. Oh, he's not black.
That is exactly where I'm coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
That's exactly how I understand. Now, me personally, I came to the United States.
And we're not taking anything away from our Nigerian brothers. They work hard. We're not taking anything. We are not taking anything away. But what the brother is saying is what I said earlier. But we appreciate your hard work and your effort. Nobody's taking away from what you're saying. I'm sorry. I wanted to put that caveat in there. Go ahead, bro.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to take away from Nigerians. I don't. But whenever we say they're hard workers, then we saying by default that the other groups are not. Every group has hard workers. So we just need to eliminate that from the lexicon. Every group has hard workers. But what I'm saying is every immigrant, including myself, know the name of the game is don't identify as an African American in the United States. That's the name of the game. That's the name of the game. Whatever you do, you do not let these folks put you in that Black folks of America group. because they're always on the lookout for that. They are always on the lookout for it. Their skin color means nothing to them. How does this person mentally identify? Yes, he's black by color, but mentally, does he consider himself Nigerian or does he consider himself a black American? Because if you consider yourself as a black American, you're going to be a problem. That's how they see it. So that's why I'm saying these are the most successful group. And again, if you go to any immigrant group, the reason why they're most successful is not because they're smarter. They can get presented more opportunities because they identify differently. That's it. More opportunities are going to come to them because they know how to play the game. Every immigrant knows it. They're lying if they're telling you different. Every immigrant knows it. Do not identify as a black American because you will be handicapped.
Yeah, bro. Go ahead, man. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah. And again, like I said, me being, and I'm just using me as an example, like I said, ever since I came to this country, and this is back in 1997, when I first got here, again, it's always funny because in Haiti, like I said, it's surrounded with black folks, but the next door neighbor, the racism is blatantly, it's a blatant racism between the Dominicans and the Haitians. So for them to not under the concept of racism, sometimes it boggles me. It boggles me. But it is what it is. When I came from the Panama, again, I came here, I'm a Hispanic, and racism is Panama is covert. It's there. They have the colorism because in Panama, they got people as dark as me and as light as, I don't know, Kim Kardashian. There's a range. So the colorism, racism is there, but it's not as overt as it is here in America. The same thing in Colombia, the same thing in Costa Rica, the same thing in Nicaragua, same thing everywhere. It's just not as overt as it is in the United States. Now, when I first got here, and me having an accent and me speaking Spanish, and I noticed this with white folks, they always, oh, you're not black, you're Hispanic. And I'm looking at my skin like, what the hell are you talking about? You're like, I am black as they come. But white folks are very smart. They're always trying to see how does this person identify in their mind. That's more important than what you look like. If I, and at the beginning I was identifying as Spanish, but as I got my Negro wake-up calls, I was like, whoa, I'm a nigger.
At what point did that happen? At what point did you push the line so much they said, all right, you get over there with those Negroes? At what point the Spanish stopped working? At what point?
Well, it wasn't that it wasn't. I would have said that I was working. It's just that's in my head. I'm Hispanic. This is what I speak Spanish. It's just normal to say I'm Hispanic. So where did it come from? When I was in high school, when I was going into the military, and everybody, I'm from Brooklyn, so and New York is a big enclave of Caribbeans, and we are very segregated when it comes to black folks. So we be black folks from different countries and different islands, but it's black. Once I got military and I went to South Carolina and I started understanding, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Now, boy, you get over there with them.
Right.
You get over there with them, right? Okay.
I was like, wait a minute. I never saw this type of white folks before.
Right. And so I'm so happy you're here. I really appreciate you. You've added tremendously to this. You spoke on something that I want to talk. In your opinion, why do you think ADOS, FBA, Black Americans are specifically targeted for that certain more poignant form of oppression directed towards anti-blacks? Why do you think, in your opinion, from a black person from another country coming here, seeing the different treatment, seeing how immigrants hold themselves out, why do you think Black Americans are specifically targeted?
Well, the reason, this is what I know to be true. American descendants of slave, FBA, whatever you want to call them as, they are the only group in America and in the world that gives problem and do not accept the status quo. Every black person around the earth have accepted this is what it is. The black folks in America are the only group that's saying, now. It may be a small group, but it nevertheless is a group that could potentially lead to something greater. Yeah. This is why Black folks in the United States, the American Descendant of Slave or FBA, are targeted because they're still fighting. Let me tell you this, Black folks all over the world, and I've been around the world, everybody has accepted white supremacy and rule of thumb under white supremacy except for the Black American. That's the only person that has not let it go. Now they may be they may be dominated by it, but nevertheless, white folks know that this could be a problem at any time.
Yeah. You can even hear like some of the brothers who are, thank you so much, Roger. And you can even hear some of the brothers who are here today. They say, well, I've been taught to ignore it. It's not that big of a deal. It doesn't bother me. You know, if I'm gonna tell you as a Black American man, if a bunch of people get the eyeballing me just because they scared of my skin color and my height, I'm like, what the hell is wrong with y'all? That's how I've been taught to respond to that. You see, if a police or somebody calls me out of my name, what the hell are you talking? I'm not going to ignore it. That's part of our culture. You see, we are combative. I told somebody this the other day. Black Americans are the first line of defense when it comes to racism in this country. That is our formal adversary. Whether you're a racist European or a racist South American or Mexican, we are the first people that are going to confront you about your racism, even if you're a racist from a Black country. You see what I'm saying? Right. And so, and so I think that, thank you so much, Roger. It's great having you. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to acknowledge Gianna Skywalker. My mom is Jamaican. She gave me and my sister white people first name before because she worked for a Jewish man and she saw her boss throw out her friend's resume with Black sounding name. Yeah, good point. What do you think? Why do you think the reason is, irrespective of everything the Black American men have to confront, why are Black men, why are we succeeding in America like we are? What are your thoughts?
Well, it just, again, the culture here. And again, this is something that I had to learn when I first got here. I didn't know nothing about no Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X. I know none about none of them. They don't teach that outside the U.S. They just don't. Right. They don't. And again, the culture in the United States is to achieve despite of. That is just ingrained in Black folks. You achieve in spite of whatever these folks put in your way. That is literally in the DNA of Black Americans. I don't think they realize that, but it is. That just has been bred in you from ever. Again.
Does it make, now I want, and I'm dissecting you because I had a lot of Caribbean brothers come in here today and I had some African brothers, and this is important. And I accept you as my brother, but my brothers and sisters here in the United States need to understand that the culture here in the United States is different and why you all respond to it the way you do. I've heard people say, man, y'all culture is crazy, it's toxic, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. Y'all cruel, y'all clannish, you're not family oriented. Do you understand why sometimes succeeding at all costs means you got to leave the family behind in Black America?
Is that a question?
Yeah, I'm asking you, Roger, because in my understanding, like especially Hispanic families, and if you're Latino or Hispanic and you're Black, your culture is Hispanic. I get it. Family first, family oriented, all that stuff. You understand why Black American culture is not so much family oriented as would be a Hispanic family from Panama, or at least why?
I definitely understand what you're saying, and yes, and because again, it goes back to how, at all costs, if you have to amputate the left arm, there's just what you do. I mean, here's what Black, and it may seem selfish, but is it? You know what I mean?
Do you understand also why Black Americans are so prone to violence, even with each other? Not that there's no violence everywhere else, but in confronting violence, do you understand why we can be violent the way we are?
Well, again,
because we live in this. Go ahead, brother. From your perspective as an outside brother coming in, having lived in both worlds, go ahead and give you in that South Carolina environment. After 3 or 4 or 5 years of that, white folks looking at you sideways, talking to you crazy, you see? But go ahead, man. I want you to say it in your own words.
People who don't understand why Black Americans are the way that they are is because they're being dishonest and they just don't want to understand. If you just take 2 to 3 seconds, everything could be explained relatively quickly. I understand, and again, it's something that I had to learn, and to a point, it's something that you can assimilate as no matter where you're from. You get what I'm saying? Now, I know that my families are immigrant, but mentally in my mind, I just adapted the culture that deep. I mean, I see myself, I think the way I understand, and I just can't. It's like, once you get that pill, you can't go back. I just cannot go back. The situation, the behavior of the Black man, the behavior of the Black woman, it could all be explained because of how Black people, and I want everybody who is a descendant of slave, you are an exceptional people. You are. Nobody on this planet has gone through what the Black man and the Black woman in the United States has gone through. Right. And you just haven't. And came out of it pretty much, I wouldn't say unscathed, but God damn it, you came out of it. You should not be here. We should not be.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Roger, thank you so much, man. I appreciate everybody who's been in here today. We've gone like 45 minutes over just because I know that this is an important topic, and I wanted to hear everybody here. I wanted to hear everybody talk. Here's the thing: Black men are succeeding in America, despite all the obstacles that have been placed in front of us. Black men have learned to succeed in a system that is designed for us to fail. Remember, if you look at pre-1806, this country had less than 400,000 African-American men or enslaved Africans in this country. And it was mostly men. We were designed to work, be worked to death, die, and then be gone. This was designed to be a white man's country. And so they worked us to death, and that was it. It was only after 1808 when they were told that, hey, the European country is going to outlaw slavery. America was outlawing the transatlantic slave trade, and so you couldn't bring any more Black slaves over here. And what was going to happen? Well, we're going to run out of slaves. We're going to have to do our own work. So what did white folks do? They said, well, we're going to need to bring some more Black women over here for breeding purposes. And that's why they had those breeding farms in Virginia, like the King Plantation, where my earliest ancestors that I've traced so far are from. And so they began to build a population up. That's why from 1808 to 1865 or 1860, you went from about 400,000 Black to about 4 million in less than 50 years, when for the 200 years before that, you had just a small amount, less than 1 million folks, or less than 400,000, thereabouts. So this is letting you know that this country was not designed for us, but yet and still we've pushed through. So you Black men should be proud of yourselves. You should be proud of your accomplishments. You should be proud of what you do. You should look at your heritage, understand that your culture is not perfect, but it is designed for what? As Dr. Amos Wilson says, it's designed for you to succeed. Your mannerisms, your way of interacting, your thoughts, your values, your expected behaviors, your practice, relationship, customs, role, rituals, courtesies, communication, and your language have all come about so that you can succeed in this society that is designed to make you fail. So kudos to you Black men. Shout out to everybody who participated in this conversation. Big shout out to all my Caribbean brothers and all my African brothers who added in from their perspective. Because see, our Black American brothers don't understand your perspective because many of them have not been there. You have an advantage in that you can come in and point out what it was like in your country and then come in and explain this. So, brothers, you should be proud of yourselves, man, and keep pushing forward. Our ancestors will be proud of us, of the success that we're making. Don't let anybody tell you you cannot succeed in this country. They have dropped us and they've dropped us in hell, and we eating fire. And that's what the leader of the king of the Zulu said once. We're going to rain hellfire on you. He said, we eat fire. So this is us. I'm proud of you Black men. I want to continue seeing you succeed. I hope you're motivated. I hope you find this message to be inspirational. I hope you've learned something from our Caribbean brothers and our African brothers who called in. I love you all. God bless you. Thank you so much for your contributions. This is Uncle D. And as I always say at this time, I'm out.